I refer to you as Charlie from the Sandbox because you hosted a morning show here in Boston for not long enough, honestly. It was called The Sandbox. It was on a radio station that's I miss very much. It was very dear to my heart, even though Mike and I worked for the competition. But that was 101.7 WFNX. I really don't think there's any other radio station that's like it.
Nope.
And your show, I've said this before, I'll mention it again. Your show I would listen to while screening phone calls for
for the other show.
Yeah, the show that you were one of the shows you were going up against in that demographic, and yeah. And there would be times where like I'd answer the phone for Hillman, and then I get confused as to whatever the person on the phone was talking about, because I'm like, they're not talking about that right now.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, they are. Yeah. Hillman doesn't do the Mega Robo Thunder phone query.
Wow, good memory. Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. We got a friend named Kevin Begley who at the time was working for Jonesy's Jukebox, which was a radio show hosted by Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols. And that was on Indy 103 in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And he would listen to the podcast while he was doing Jonesy's Jukebox. So it was a very similar like experience for him. But he was, at least he could pause and come back to it.
Right.
But yeah, no, that was you saying that radio station was unlike any other. You're absolutely right. Like, I worked for all different kinds of radio stations over the years, and they were teeny tiny mom and pops, kind of like FNX was. And then like major corporations. I worked for Cox Broadcasting at one point. And that radio station and the stuff we got away with there, it was the Wild West. Like, we threw two people and me and Private Snowball in a van and drove across the country in like a rented minivan. And they literally signed like a one sheet, like PDF, like contract that was basically like, if we die, it's not the radio station's fault. Whereas, any like legitimate corporation, there would have been lawyers involved and multiple documents and like, a whole thing. You're like, it'll be fine. Nobody died yet. It'll be good.
Keyword.
So yeah.
Keyword is yet.
Yeah,
I'm not dead yet.
Yeah, FNX. I
feel happy.
FNX was unique in that up until 2012, it was independently owned, and it was one of the few, at that point, one of the few independent radio stations left, because everything it's either iHeart or Odyssey or Cumulus. It's you can count on one hand, I think, all the major conglomerates out there. And only...
and it showed, too. I mean, we had no budget for anything. Everything was, well, who can we sign on to sponsor? So we actually have a budget for this thing. Mm-hmm. Especially toward the end, like after we left, like it got grim. Like it was like National Grid showed up with two guys in hard hats and like a police officer to turn the power off. Like in the building. And the program director at the time had to write them a personal check out of his own bank account for the balance to literally keep the lights on at the radio station. So yeah, there was a lot of mismanagement. Over the course of the life of the radio station, but especially toward the end, it got real bad.
Yeah.
So
it was rough.
When the Sandbox left, and that was at the very beginning of 2010, I remember I was working at the radio station that morning. I was working at AF that morning, and I remember I informed everybody there, hey, the Sandbox ended and it's gone. Those guys were let go today, and her Spaz turns around, and looks at me, and just goes, "Yeah, you should apply. You should take your jobs." And young eager me was like, hey, sounds like a great idea. But
am I right in that he is now running for like city council in Revere, or was running for city council in Revere? Is that the same dude?
Yes. Mike, did you know that?
I think I vaguely heard that, like kind of like a sprinkling.
Okay. Yeah. He Well, I think the election happened already, and Spaz did not win. I think he came in like
third.
I think he came in like 6th place out of 5 people.
Out of 5, yeah.
Yeah. So, but
I somehow voted against myself.
1 for Martin, 2 for Martin. Would you like me to count again, Bart? Yeah. That when you guys left FNX, that was just a weird. You're right. It was a weird time. Because it wasn't just your show. I would listen to that station like religiously, especially working AAF events. Mike, you can attest to this. We would sit in the van. We would drive around the AAF van listening to FNX.
Yeah. It wouldn't be BCN ever. It would be FNX.
No. And it was such a, I remember like weekends especially were just bizarre because they were doing this like, for like 6 months, they were doing this weird promotion or not promotion, but like thing on air where like they would play, it was like an A to Z type thing. They'd play a song from like a band and then like the listener would quote unquote text in to then like pick the second song. And it was always like out of 2 possible songs you could pick.
Yeah.
And they would always play the first one. So it's like, well, your choices are, it's like, okay, so we played Wonderwall by Oasis. So your choices are Don't Look Back in Anger or Don't Look Back in Anger. So it was just it was, I think you guys were there in the golden era, not just the golden era for that station, but for that genre of music.
Well, and there was just there, and that, there was so much, in hindsight, there was just so much fumbling around with that place forever. Because I worked there twice, and I didn't even know how to put it in words. I mean, other than the word fumbling, just nobody ever really got a fair shot to put their stamp on it and really figure it out.
You're right.
And, of course, hindsight's 2020 and, from 10,000 feet and all the cliches like blah, 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 they kept trying to overshoot and to be, they wanted to play with BCN. They wanted to be like with the big boys. And I mean, and AAF was, a solid second out of, 1, 2, 3 BCN, AAF, FNX. And it kind of probably fell that way, too, in terms of like budget and staff and resources. BCN obviously had, at one point in time, like infinity money. Mm-hmm. And, and FNX just had, it was a third world country. I mean, we had no resources. Nobody wanted to work for the money that they were paying, except for the handful of people that had been there since the inception, like Henry and Julie. Mm-hmm. But so many people just came and went, and they just never gave anyone a chance to just lock in and guide it. And, the fact that it survived 2008, especially with a, 4-person morning show, was a borderline miracle. That we made it to early 2010 was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But it was just, it was that baseball team that has a new manager every 2 years, or the NFL team, they fire the coach after a year and a half. That's what it was. It was just like, well, this, the ratings still suck. Like, bring it in, like, no, embrace the suck. Like, embrace the bad ratings. Stop chasing McDonald's money. Mm-hmm. Go to every mom and pop car dealership and take money from them. It's a grassroots political campaign. Bernie Sanders funded his campaign off of $5 donations. And that was even like a running joke at one point, which I think might have actually worked. Turn it into fucking NPR and just like take donations from listeners.
Yeah. Like
if we had like fund drive weekends instead of doing like, text in Wonderwall, text in, especially now, like, with Apple Pay and stuff. If we had asked people for money, people would have sent money to that radio station.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
Like, as you guys know, like, the fans of that radio station were fans. Like, they were fanatics.
Diehards.
Yep.
Right?
Loyal.
Yeah, that should be in like Broadcasting 101, a P1. The FNX listeners. That is the definition of a P1.
At one point in time, like, all the research and, you got to pay for all the research stuff. But one of the things and they hung on to it was at one point in time, FNX had their listenership was the highest earning listenership of any radio station in Boston. So, it's just, again, hindsight, blah, blah, blah. If just there had been one person charismatic enough to lock in and really take the reins and guide it, I don't think it would have made it to now, but I think it would have made it a lot longer and had been, more successful, would still exist in some way, shape, or form. I mean, like EQX is still around.
Yeah.
And that's a, medium to small market, independently owned alternative rock station. When rock music is dead, somehow they're still around.
Yep.
And
Rock's not dead.
No.
I don't know if they're locally owned or if the company that owns them is like one could consider them a conglomerate or even just like one of those like corporations that owns just, clusters of radio stations in cities that people have never heard of. But then there's 96X down in Hampton Roads, Virginia.
Is that still around?
That is still around.
No shit. That was the station I listened to when I was, a teenager driving down to Virginia Beach.
Yeah. I just, cause I follow some of their, on-air people on Instagram, and the lady that does, I believe she does the midday shift there, but she just started voice tracking mornings at like some other alt station. I think maybe like Texas, which is nice. I mean, that's that's going to look great on a broadcaster's resume. But and then there's this kid, Nick Chappelle, I think is his name, and he's been there. I think he's been there for like 20 years now. And I was following him on Instagram for a while, and he is the definition of Disney parent.
Oh, God.
Like every post is about Disney. Dude goes to Disney with his family like twice a year and is always somehow finding something new and exciting to do. And I'm like, this is too much, man. I respect you. I respect I respect what you do as a broadcaster. I can't handle that much Disney. I'm sorry, dude.
I'll be damned. 96X is still there.
Yep.
Look at that.
WROX.
On my website right now.
Yeah, Mike, their call letters are literally WROX.
That's amazing. 30 years. Oh, they carry the Woody Show. Oh, God.
Do they now? Oh, wow. I didn't know that. They had a period of time around the time that the Sandbox was around. That station was carrying Opie and Anthony in the morning. And they were like O&A's like last like affiliate before they left FM. Like their syndication collapsed so poor. It was so bad that station was the last one to carry them outside of New York. So it was Opie and Anthony, and then Man Cow, and then
oh my God, is he still around?
No, not anymore.
No, really?
Yeah, he retired during the pandemic. Because he was on The Loop out in Chicago, which suffered the same fate as WAAF. They also, before AF got purchased by Ned Flanders FM, The Loop.
Fuck them. Yeah. Fuck them so hard.
So Mancal went to WLS and then like was there for like 10 months, and then the pandemic happened and he's like, I'm not doing this. I can't do this 3 hours a day. So
well, that Ned Flanders FM ruined my my lottery plan, which was if I won like the $1 billion Powerball.
Yeah.
There's a small station up here called North Shore 1049.
Oh, yeah.
And my plan was to buy North Shore 1049 and basically hire all my FNX friends back.
Oh, hell
so,
yeah.
Like give Julie Kramer a job. Henry's not going to leave GBH, so like whatever. But like, like bring in Ty, like whoever wants to do a shift, basically.
Hell yeah.
And then they sold to stupid Ned Flanders FM, whatever it's called.
Well, they got like competition too, because there's the Educational Media Foundation, which is what purchased AAF, and then there's Air One, which is their competition. Even the religious radio, there's like cutthroat competition.
Of course there is, because it's late stage capitalism.
Mike, you might appreciate this. Remember Donnie from Three Olives?
Yes.
He, for I don't think it's right to say a brief period of time. I think it was a couple of years. He co-hosted the morning show on 1049.
Wow. Oh yeah, no, I do know that. Yes.
And he's doing something, and it's
I like how that's still his name, Donnie 3L.
Right. And take it with a grain of salt, because that guy is all over the place, just literally just bouncing off the walls. But he had purchased, Chris, their entire on-air studio, like the equipment, and in his home, like rebuilt the studio.
Oh, that's hilarious.
From that radio station. He was going to start up like a podcast, but he was going to do it using all of their equipment, right down to the console, like the table, like everything, like literally picked up the innards of the studio and transplanted it into his house, and was having like one of their engineers hook it all up for him.
Like London Bridge over in Arizona now. Just moved it all over.
100%. 100%. He's even got the mic flags up. Like he's not going to switch those out.
What is Three Olives? Is it a restaurant?
No, it's
flavored vodkas.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I remember I had a large bottle of Fruit Loops flavored vodka that I got for free from Donnie. Yeah, that's I was young and naive and didn't know any better. Let's put it that way.
God almighty. Nope.
Now, in 2010, early 2010, did the station management at the time, or the entity? I'm gonna say the entity, an entity being the person who came in and made changes. Were they not aware of just the fan following that your show had when they saw the number of people that showed up on Exchange Street like the next day to rally to get you guys rehired?
I don't think so. I think Tierney lived in Tierney land, Tierney, Vegas, and just had blinders on to anything that didn't have to do with him and his wife. Who did something in the record industry. I forget what her role was, but it was, I'm going to, shape this into the thing. And that was, forever the problem with that radio station, with that ownership was the ownership itself was very hands off. They never came out there. They never really thought about it. They were more concerned with, running the Boston Phoenix and the other satellite Phoenix Eye. So they just turned it over to him, and he immediately started to kind of like mess with us, and again, if I were a more fully formed human being, the fully formed human being that I am now, I wish that I had done a better job of standing up to him, because he was both a bully and an idiot, which usually go hand in hand.
Sure.
And we had this, we did, I think it was Pop Trash that Fletcher did. No. It wasn't Pop Trash. It was Fletcher's music review. And it was like one of my favorite segments. And Fletcher was so good at it. And it was always so funny and so fun. And it was fun to put together. And we enjoyed the hell out of it. And that was, that old adage of, do stuff for you that you find funny and interesting, and other people will find it funny and interesting. And that's exactly what it was. And we would have these interminable, epic air checks with this dickhead. And we did the music review, and it was everything. He would pick a metal record, and he would pick a pop record, and a Christmas album, and whatever. And Tierney was like, well, why are you talking about this metal record? And Fletcher's just like, because it's funny and like fun and it's interesting. And, Tierney was just like, I don't think it's funny. And it was just like, well, then it's not for you.
Yeah.
Like, like who died and made you the arbiter of funny?
Right.
And again, the fully formed person that I am now that I wasn't at the time, I wish I had been, to have actually said that out loud to him instead of being like, oh my God, I need this job because I have young children to feed. So it was basically just, and that was, part of the problem with that radio station full stop was they would just chuck some new dickhead in there to like, mix things up. I mean, the same thing happened with Keith got there. I'm sure people were mad that they let the morning guy go that we replaced. But at the same time, like so much stayed the same. Henry was always there.
Yep.
Julie was always there. Like, So
why weren't you doing those air checks with Tugboat? Why were you doing them with Tierney?
Oh, because he had to do everything. Like he had to have put his fingers in everything, and he was the puppet master. And I obviously wasn't there because it was like 7 o'clock at night, and he was still there, and was like complaining to Paul Driscoll, who was there at 7 o'clock at night because that was his shift. Was complaining to Paul Driscoll, like, hey man, like all the radio stations I worked at before, like people hung out all day. And Paul was like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Like these guys have like lives, and like Charlie has a family. Like they get here at 5 a.m. They're not gonna fucking hang out here for 14 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I think it was like, he didn't have a kids. His wife traveled a lot for work, so he had nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, well, I'm here. Why isn't everybody else here? You know? And it's like, yeah, bro, it's not like, that's not how it works. Like Julie would walk in at 9:45 and leave at 10:15 because she'd been there for 25 years.
Right. Yeah. The people that I knew that worked in radio who would be there pretty much all day, it's because they didn't want to go home to what they had painted as.
Don't make me leave.
Exactly. Certain individuals who worked on the morning show.
And when I worked there the first time around, when I was 21, that was me. Like I'd be there all day. Like any day that I could be there, I was there. Yeah. I was holding out on the jobs, but because I fucking loved it. Like I loved it there.
Oh yeah.
But but at the time I was, however old I was, 35, I guess. And my kids were 4 and 3. Like I got to get home. My wife's been home with them all day.
Right.
But that was just that, and it wasn't like I shit on Tierney because he deserves it. But also that was just the problem with that place all along.
Mm-hmm.
And we got fucked just as much. I mean, Keith's the one that really got cornholed in that deal. Because he was an FNX P1.
It's in his yearbook, his high school yearbook.
Yeah. He was an FNX P1 and he couldn't even pick up the radio station, pre-internet. He would have friends record it and send it to him.
Yeah.
I don't even know how he would do it, but he would get the playlists and everything. So he finally had this dream job, and those, they took it away from him.
Right. And he got to, because he worked with you guys down in Richmond. So that's how the Sandbox came together, because you guys all worked together.
Yeah.
And then this was his.
So he put that whole thing together, and he was guiding it and putting a stamp on it. But the problem, and we had a great GM when we got there. But of course he left because he wanted to make more money, because he was a sales guy and he wanted to make more money. Was that
Kurtz? So, was that Gary Kurtz?
God, yeah, good memory. And that was part of my problem with radio too, was I couldn't remember anybody's names.
Well, Kurtz went over to Entercom. He was at AAF when I started working there in 2008. So
yeah, he's a crazy person.
Yeah,
I would love to know what he's up to now.
That's why
it was just that was just the problem. But that was the problem with the radio station in general, and the company in general, was they just didn't let anybody, couldn't keep people there long enough, or didn't let people stay there long enough to, because we finally, as a radio show, we finally locked in, those 2 years in, whatever it was. And we were good, going back and, because I have a ton of because we recorded everything. I still have all those podcasts and stuff. And going back and listening to some of that, I'm like, Jesus, this is good.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I know you've put them up online, and they come and go. And I think you've sent me Dropbox links too, and I might need to trouble you to do that again. I was actually combing through the Internet Archive last night, and
funny.
A single broadcast from 2009 is all that's up there. And then a couple of music performances, the Dead Confederate, and then Company of Thieves. Going back to why I think that was the best era of alt rock music, indie music when you guys were there. But and I want you to tell a story. I think I know it because I'm a nerd and I know everything about radio. But I want you to just tell Mike the story about when you guys had that epiphany moment early on in the Sandbox's history when Jeff Garland came in.
Yeah. Um, so we were, I don't even know how far it was into the show. And like, I mean, Mike, you know how it is. Like you've been around radio enough where you're just like, you're desperate and like grabbing at straws and like, it's just forced. And you're trying to be funny and you're trying to make each other laugh and you're fake laughing. And it was just, and that's what we were doing initially. Um, and and it was like, it was not fun. But any show like has to grow like that. So anyway, sorry. So Jeff Garland, the comedian, comes in, and like I kind of knew who he was. Fletcher was a big fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like I recognized him just from like TV and stuff, and I think Ed knew him from Curb as well. So he came in, and he's physically he's just a big dude. So he was this big guy in like a trench coat, and it had snowed the night before. It was that snowstorm in like 2008. When everyone got like stuck trying to get out of work and like all the school buses remember that one? Yep. Right. Yeah. That was the one that's the snow. Everyone says 2015 broke Boston. No, that was the snowstorm that broke Boston. Mm-hmm. So he came in, we were all a little frazzled and he was a little frazzled and, we just started talking to him. And initially that's not even true. We were interviewing him. And as we were interviewing him, it kind of transitioned to we were talking to him. We were having a conversation. And Jeff Garland was just kind of there. And I think him getting there was such a pain in the ass because of the snow, because stupid Lynn was so far from Boston. He was like, well, I fucking humped it all the way up here. I'm not going to come in and do 7 minutes and leave. So I'm just going to hang out. Which we were thrilled with.
I got to say, that's awesome when it's just like, I'm here for my promo and in 3 minutes I'm gone. You're like, okay, now it sucks. You're like, hey guys, I got nothing else to do. I'm just gonna hang out for the like 4 breaks.
Yeah,
100%. So yeah. He was cool, which really helped, right? So we're just talking at this point, and we're kind of like, Fletcher's talking about Curb and blah blah blah, and did Jordy or Gary come in? Jordy came in. So Jordy was a big fan. He was like the head sales guy, mm-hmm. And he had stopped on the way and grabbed a couple of boxes of Pop-Tarts. And he just fucking waltzes into the studio like the middle of a break. And we're like, Jordy, what the fuck are you doing? And he just dumps out a bag of Pop-Tarts. And of course, Garland's like, oh, great. Like, I love Pop-Tarts. So we're yelling at Jordy. And then we're talking to Garland about Pop-Tarts. And Fletcher just goes, put one of those in the microwave for 15 seconds and it will set you free. And Garland's face was like, what? He's like, put it in the microwave. So we got like the intern. Fletcher's like, intern, like put this in the microwave for 15 seconds and bring it back to Jeff. So the intern takes the Pop-Tart, puts it to put it in the microwave, and then fucking Gary walks in. Like, again, still on the air, like red lights on. And Gary walks in. He's like, hey, how you doing? I'm Gary Kurtz. Like, nice to meet you. Like, we're like, Gary, we're like interviewing Jeff. He's like, oh, sorry. I'm a big fan. Blah, blah, blah. So it's just like, it's borderline chaos. And then the Pop-Tart comes in and Garland's eating the Pop-Tart. He's like, oh, you're right. Like, this is so good. And Fletcher's like, see, I told you. And that was when, that was the epiphany. That was the breakthrough for us, was stop talking at him and just talk to him and then embrace the chaos, embrace the 0.9 rating, embrace the suck, just embrace the chaos of this nonsense building in this nonsense fucking town and the nonsense drive you had to make here and our crazy salespeople just coming in and dumping Pop-Tarts for him. Oh, and Gary stole a pack of Pop-Tarts from him.
Oh.
And we're like, Gary, bring back the Pop-Tarts. So that happens. And then he's still hanging out because now he's eating Pop-Tarts and is happy. And we're like, we're going to do the W.
I can't drive. I've been eating Pop-Tarts.
Right. Yeah. And he's just doesn't want to leave. So we're doing the WTF line to wrap up the show, which was the voicemail line. Right.
Yep.
So we're playing it back and it's literally all people screaming about being stuck in their cars. This woman's I've been sitting in front of the MFA for 6 hours. I'm almost out of gas and I'm pretty sure I'm going to die here. And Garland's just completely enthralled with the whole thing. And halfway through the WTF line, Jeff just goes, can I just stop here for a second? I just want to tell you guys, this is the greatest morning show I have ever been on. And we were just like, what the fuck? Like, this is awesome. Like, this is the best. And literally from that day, and like even in the air check with Keith afterwards, we were all just like, that's it. Like, we did it. Like, that was it. Like, that was the, we cracked the code or whatever. And like from that point forward, you can literally listen to the podcast in sequential order from there. And we immediately improved from that point forward. So yeah, so like I've been like a huge Jeff Garland fan ever since. But it, like that's what it took. And that's what sucks about it is there were so many of those moments at that radio station of like people suddenly figuring it out and then like getting blown out. Yeah. Or like leaving for like more money. And it's like, fuck, like they had just like, Storm, like, I don't know if you remember Storm and Birdsey.
Yep. Birdsey.
But like, I remember Birdsey.
You remember Birdsey, I'm sure. Yeah, right. But like Storm had like figured it out. Like he had cracked the code. Like he came in and he was like too weird. And then he dialed it back a little bit and he was just weird enough. And like he locked in and then like, and then they like rammed him into this Storm and Birdsey nonsense and all this shit.
That's I would guess that's kind of like Fletcher's big recent hire down there at Big 100, Paul Jackson, because he did the morning show.
Right. Yeah. So he was one of the morning guys at FNX. Exactly right. Jackson, the pharmacist out of Providence. Yeah.
Yep. And they very briefly before Jackson got that gig at Big 100, taking over for the smartest guy in radio, Don Geronimo, acting like it's still 2002. Just before Jackson got that gig, he and Brian Mulhern, they revived Jackson and the Pharmacist for
a
brief run. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was on like, I didn't realize people were still doing this in this day and age, but it was on like an internet station, and like I don't know if they ever like released any of the recordings as podcasts, but
interesting.
They were doing it together for a while, and like Brian was very heavily promoting it on social media, because I know he and Paul have been very close ever since the 1 year of radio they did together at WFNX. Because then Paul went to MMR and was there for 20 years or whatever.
Working for my former boss Bill Weston.
What I like those with him, Paul and Brian, and then you and Ed and Fletcher, is that like there's a genuine rapport there, there's a genuine friendship there. And I always love seeing when you guys like get together, when everyone travels to meet up and you get together, and you always call it a Sandbox reunion, but then just seeing everyone together again, it's like, I'm glad this still happens. I'm glad this is a thing.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's reason number one why that's where my radio career ended, was because it was just like, it's not going to get any better than this. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm working with my best friends, and like, what am I going to do? Like, I was in Vermont for like a year and a half working with people that I didn't know, and they were fine, and it was lovely, and I liked them all just fine, but it just wasn't.
Yeah, right.
It wasn't right. Like, it just didn't,
It's Vermont.
And it was also Vermont. Yeah.
Now,
sorry, the dog has decided to hi. I know, I see you.
As it usually
but yeah,
goes.
You're 100% right. And like, we're still, and that's, I mean, we were friends first and coworkers second.
Now
and still are.
I can't remember if you replaced him or if he replaced you up there at NCS, Jamie Canfield.
Neither. We worked together at the same time.
Okay.
So Jamie was the music director and doing nights, I think, when I was there. But no, I am very, 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 very infrequently in touch with Jamie still. He's in like Idaho, I think.
Yep, that's right. He works for like a transportation company now. He got out of radio, and he's doing that because now here's why I know Jamie. It just so happens it's a small radio world and that you guys know each other. But Jamie was the voice of DJ Adam First on the Wave 103 in Grand Theft Auto Vice City. So Mike, when you're cruising down Ocean Beach in your Infernus running over the old women, put on Wave 103 and there's Jamie Canfield.
All right.
Talking about robots taking over the world in the future.
And an even in an even smaller, weirder world scenario, it turns out that I knew this at the time, but didn't do the math until well after the fact. Rykodisc used to be based out of Salem, and Jamie worked at Rykodisc.
Okay.
Prior, I think just before going to the Point in Vermont. And I went to a lady's house to help her. I fix computers for a living now. And I went to a lady's house to help her with her computers. And I walk in, and I'm like, there's all of this Zappa stuff and all of this NRBQ stuff in her house. I mean, it's like to the walls. And I'm like, wow, you like really like Zappa, huh? And she was like, well, yeah. She's like, I used to work for a record label that like redistributed, right?
Yeah. Asking the wrong person. I can't pronounce anything.
Yeah. Like all of redistributed. Yeah. Right. Thank you. All of his music. And I'm like, Rykodisc? And she was like, yeah. And I'm like, do you know Jamie Canfield? She's like, of course I know Jamie. It's like, we took a selfie together and I texted to Jamie. I'm like, look whose house I'm in. Nice. And then like, as the longer I've lived here, like, you know, people probably, like, I just helped a guy with his computer a couple months ago. And he was like, oh, I used to work at a record company. I'm like, Rykodisc? And he's like, yep. And I'm like, I know Jamie. And he's like, oh, no shit. So like, there's still like those ghosts of Rykodisc around Salem too.
I didn't know he worked for Rykodisc. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I also didn't realize that Rykodisc was local.
It's a small, they used to be over in Shetland Park. It's a small, weird world. Paul, who runs the record exchange here, when they shut down in, 19, whatever it was, early 2000s, that same dude whose house I'm blanking on his name. I know where he lives, but I can't remember his name. He let Paul in and was like, take whatever you want. And Paul's like, seriously? And he's like, yeah, here's some boxes. Like, go fucking nuts. And he was like taking like 2 copies of like everything.
Nice.
But yeah, they were over in Shetland Park for a long time.
Nice.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's a small, weird industry. So the fact that you know who Jamie is pretty wild.
Yeah, if you get a chance to talk to him again, just let him know you did this podcast with a Grand Theft Auto super fan who could at one point probably recite the whole DJ script from that radio station. So
I'm pretty sure. Yep. There's his number. I'll send him a text message when we're done here. That's hilarious.
Hell yeah. Yeah. And he was in the lesser known Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, which is arguably better than Vice City. Everyone knows Vice City. People forget that it has a prequel game, but he was in that as well. It's fascinating because, I mean, Rockstar Games, I know you said don't talk about video games, but here we are. But it's relevant because Rockstar Games is based out in New York, and Laszlo, he's not there anymore, but he was the guy that would set up all this stuff. But he would just reach out. Apparently he knew everybody in like New York, tri-state, New England radio. Because if you look in the credits for those games,
well, Nick Carter did it too, didn't he?
He did. Yeah, Spaz. Yeah. We were talking about Spaz. He's in. He calls in on the radio station. It's the funk radio station in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, where George Clinton is the DJ, and it's Spaz yelling at George Clinton about something.
How bizarre!
It's such a, and it's like you look at all these names, and now when I look in the credits, I look at all these names, I'm like, I know of this person.
I know that guy.
Person. Yeah, they just, and it's. Just like in my case, it's just like, hey, I stalked you on Facebook, but like we all worked in radio and it's a very small world. And then you end up like networking with them. And that, alone, I mean, I came into it just some, kid who just played a lot of Grand Theft Auto and became enthralled with the radio aspect of it. And then realizing, hey, these are all like legitimate radio people who are in this and do this. And that's why it sounds so legit. Jeff Berlin, whose voice is in quite literally everything. He told me that he has to assemble, he has to write, produce, and assemble all of the imaging for those games himself, as if he's working for a client. They don't give him the material. They're like, use your library. Write the scripts.
So funny.
Yeah.
Huh.
I apologize in advance if this is like potentially ripping off any Band-Aids here, but I am curious because this did fracture recently in Boston radio, but Toucher and Richard no more.
Yeah.
And I know at one point your show went up against theirs when they got moved over to mornings. Was there any like friction between the two shows? Any bad blood between you and them?
I mean, I don't think so. They did. They talked about us at some point. I forget what the circumstances were, but it was some event where like a bunch of radio stations showed up and like Rich was talking about us. But I mean, I listened to them briefly when they were on the Sports Hub. I think I lasted about 6 months. I was like, all right, like I'll give this a try. Like they're number one for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I found the only person that I liked and identified with was John Wallach, who I genuinely, appreciate. Like I like him. But I just, I don't know. I just didn't get it. It wasn't for me. And, I feel bad for Fred, honestly. Like, I don't know him from a hole in the wall, but I mean, he's just had a rough couple of years.
Yeah.
And there's a little part of me, like, not to sound like a total cunt, but there's a little part of me that was like, this is karma kind of coming back for you a little bit, bud.
Sure.
Because like, when John Dennis like went into rehab and he was like, giving him shit on the air, it's like, you don't like, no, like, dude, like, don't,
yeah, he
don't leave that alone.
One of my favorite,
but of course, like he couldn't help himself.
Right. One of my favorite Fred moments ever is he went on this like 15-minute long tirade against Kirk Minihane back when Kirk was on WEEI after Dennis left. And it
was that the sports debate thing?
Maybe.
Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, it was in response to their Kirk torpedoing the morning show's ratings, but like Kirk did some like bit where he was like doing like a fake protest out in front of the CBS building to get Scott Zolak fired, if I remember correctly. So Fred went on his tangent about him, and ultimately, like, Kirk then left shortly afterwards because he had a mental health crisis.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
And then there was like a period of time where Fred and then the morning show and the station and their fans are all claiming victory. Well, then the same thing happens to Fred just a few years later.
Exactly.
So it just goes back to what you just said about karma. It's like,
yeah. And then, and suddenly you have your own substance abuse issues and, it's just kind of, so I found him distasteful and I just found Rich just kind of disingenuous. I didn't believe him. But that's also just totally based off of their radio personalities.
Right.
They could be perfectly lovely people in person. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Were you able to resonate with them just because they were transplants to Boston? So, I mean, I know you worked in Boston, you worked at FNX long before you came back from the Sandbox, but just because, you didn't start off as local.
No, because I mean, all radio people are transient, other than Henry and Julie, like, everybody's moved around everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, I just, I gave them a shot for a little bit on the Sports Hub because I literally listen to, that's the only radio I listen to. I listen to Phil Gomez in the afternoon, primarily because of Big Jim. And then I listen to a little bit of NPR, like in the car. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, I'm like, I'm pushing 50 years old, but I consume media like a millennial where I listen to podcasts and Spotify.
Yeah, same.
Because the rest of it, I just can't, I can't. Like, I was in Connecticut recently, and I'm in a radio station taking pictures of people, and everyone was perfectly lovely, and they were all very nice, and I had a lovely time. But for God's sake, listening to those radio stations throughout the day,
Painful, slightly.
oh, dude. And like my friend Kevin, like who I talked about earlier, he just started this show with this woman named Jenna. She was like, I got into radio in 2012. I was like, why? Like, why would you do that?
I got out of radio by 2012.
Yeah, same.
Exactly, right? I was done 2 years before you started. But and I listened to it and I was like, this is nice. And like I appreciate what they're doing. But if I listened to this every day, I would drive into oncoming traffic. Like I can't. It's, and I especially morning radio, like just gives me like the skeeves. Like I just can't.
Yeah. I try to listen to just like, I'll listen to Fred now because it's just Fred for the time being. But then,
well, I'm real interested to see where that goes.
I'm betting they're gonna use Hardy. They're gonna put Hardy over there.
Exactly right.
Today and tomorrow, Hardy's been co-hosting. So and today was good. I mean, the chemistry's there. I think this is the like audition. And I've tried listening to other shows like around the country. It's just not.
Are you hearing it's asshole o'clock right now?
Yes, a little bit, but that's okay.
That's fine. Do we need to? We can take a break in a second. Here, I just want to say what you just mentioned about the radio station, like a big radio station event, all the radio stations coming together. And Mike, I think you can attest to this. Well, actually, I have two things, but the first thing I'll say is that because when Mike and I were doing promotions, and we would do big events like the big car shows at the Expo Center, and BCN, AAF, FNX would be there. BCN would be the people who will come over and trash all of our shit and deface and vandalize all of our stuff and make our jobs incredibly difficult. And then the FNX people were always the ones to come over and lend a hand and help us out,
clean up
and break everything, help us break down. Then we started helping each other break everything down.
Yeah.
And the FNX people, the street team, like when Nick Gemelli was on the street team.
Yeah. Turncoat Nick.
Yeah. Ian McLeod and, Allison Smith, all of them, the nicest people in the world, the nicest people in the world. I would
still see Ian. Ian was around Salem for a while. I think he has since relocated not far, but he worked at a cider house here in Salem for a little bit. So I would see him every now and again. You're right. And that's like, and that was another reason, like I didn't want to move to Poughkeepsie and do all that shit. And, there was that, despite it being a lawless country in Lynn, everyone was very banded together. Like there was very little, like, if any, backstabbing or, subterfuge, everyone was just there to help and to lend a hand and to try to be helpful. And, like I remember the one of the first remote events I did as the Sandbox with the with the street team, and we got to the end of the event, and it was me and like maybe 2 or 3 street teamers, and I got to the end of the event, and I like started cleaning up the table and folding up the tablecloth, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm helping to clean up. Like we got to break down and get out of here." And they were like, "You're helping?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, like, let's get the fuck out of here."
What is going on here? I'm confused.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's not like a shot at Henry or Julie or whatever, because that's just, they came up as, the street team does that. It wasn't like a sense of like, superiority. They were just like, that's the street team job. And I think like me and Fletcher and Ed, like all brought that kind of like, no, we all help out and we all contribute. Mm-hmm. So it's nice that like kind of carried over to, to your interactions with the FNX people too.
Yeah. And it just made the job a lot easier too, knowing that like when the BCN people, and then it became ZLX people, like because Sports Hub didn't really do it too much to us after BCN went away. ZLX people would screw around with us, but no, if we knew they were around, obviously we had to be cautious. If we saw the FNX people there, then we knew
it was chill.
It was a safe zone. It was okay, and we could just hang out with each other and just shoot the shit, and there was no like fake war going on that,
And that was the other thing that I found so weird about Fred. I don't really, I always kind of vibe that it was a Fred thing and not so much a Rich thing, where Fred still seemed to be like operating in this, like, it's still 1994 range. Whereas like it's all about radio wars and like, let's call out like the other morning show and blah, blah, blah. And whatever that segment was where they were talking about us from whatever event, honestly, shut up. I honestly can't remember. And all three of us were just like, what are they doing? Like, why are they even like, who gives a shit? Like, why are we even talking? I mean, it was literally like, like you were saying, like a car show or something. Like it was some like, it was the Celtics like breakfast event, like, whatever it was. And we were just, and someone was like, oh, Touch and Rich are talking about you. And we were like, why? Like, it was so odd.
I think that's because they, were marketed as being the local version of Opie and Anthony, and then for a while,
Opie, and I get it. Like, Fred interned for Stern at one point, so he was kind of like carrying that torch of like, radio wars. And it was like, nobody gives a shit, dude. Like,
right?
Who cares?
And even then, I think that the O&A radio wars totally staged. I don't think any of that was legitimate. So like to see how like other radio shows then go in and be like, hey, let's be like Opie and Anthony and instigate this war with this other show in this, or like even in this other market. It's like, okay, but this is all fake, you see. So for you to then go in and do it in all sincerity, not only do you look like a jackass, you're probably going to get sued now too, And
it's just corny. Like like the listeners, like who cares?
Right.
And like we would occasionally, when they would get on one of those jags, like we would get calls to the WTF line. It was like, what are we going to do? Like air these? Like, no, like we just delete them. Like who gives a shit? Yeah. So there's plenty of stuff about radio that I do miss. There's more that I don't.
And on that note, I'll wrap up the radio, the trip down memory lane with mentioning, because I don't know if I ever did, but when you were on that station in Connecticut, when I believe you're voice tracking mornings down there
for like a hot minute.
Yeah. But I listened and it was good.
Oh, did you?
I did. It was good. I don't know if I ever told you, but it was good. I would listen to it at work. It would help the morning go by. So.
Oh, that's funny. That's good. I never listened once.
Because I still read Ramp and Radio Inside every day, and then to see you come up in a headline that you were coming back to radio and doing morning somewhere.
Yeah, that was kind of neat, and being able to do fake radio from this chair that I'm sitting in, was kind of cool. But
that's the joy.
Well, thanks for that. That's funny. It's hilarious. I even, like when I was doing that's the same cluster down in Connecticut that I was taking pictures at in November, where I got that cold. This cold that I still have a month and a half later. And like Keith would introduce me to people and they would be like, weren't you on the Fox for like 6 months? And I'm like, yes, like that was me.
It was me.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, no, it was a good time. I
know that Mike listened to every day, didn't you, Mike?
Every damn day. I've got all of the recordings.
Big fan.